Let's bring in our next guest. He is one of the hosts of the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show, which is a national podcast covering the biggest stories from around the league, hosted by NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson, who Matt is joining us now from Steelers training camp behind enemy lines. But we are glad to have Matt making his debut today. What's up, Matt? How you doing?
Hey, how's it going? My apologies. I'm from my tiny little dorm room here in St. Vincent College at Steeler training camp, so I hope I sound okay, but good to be here. It's going to be fun.
Man, you just gave me chills down my spine because this looks just like two-day camp at Ohio University in them small dorms. Do they at least got you together with an AC? Do you have a window unit?
The whole dorm is air conditioned, so it's come a long way since the Joe Green days. But it's we're sharing a shower. It's rough. It's getting to be a little old. I'm ready to go home.
Matt, Steeler fans are going on and on about Kenny Pickett.
Yeah.
Now, we want the Steelers to suck 100%. I hope they lose every game this year. In fact, I want them to lose every game the rest of the history of their franchise.
That'd be great.
I'm not a believer in Kenny Pickett, but I wonder if maybe I'm being biased because I hate the Steelers. So are you to me, Kenny Pickett is Jimmy Garoppolo, Mac Jones, that level of quarterback. He's just a guy along for the ride maybe. Am I wrong about that? Is he going to be better than that?
I think he's better than that. And I'll be honest. I mean, my career, I was at Pitt for 3 years as the recruiting assistant. The 1 year I was a scout was for your guys' Brownies back in the day. And I didn't love Kenny coming out of school. I thought he was that type of guy. I thought he was a game manager. But the more I watched him and more I've been around him, and maybe I'm biased, I'll be honest. You're around these guys, it's a little hard not to be. He is a much better playmaker, athlete than I expected, tremendous leader, good accuracy, enough arm strength. The little baby hands thing hasn't popped up. I have high hopes. I have high hopes in that I think he could be a 10 to 14th best starting quarterback in the league type of guy. Now, is that good enough to beat Lamar, Burrow, Watson, and Mahomes, et cetera? That's where I have my questions. But I think he'll be a good starting NFL quarterback.
Well, Matt, you just mentioned Watson. Where do you project him to be at? There's a lot of people who put a lot of emphasis on the 6 games, and they kind of forget about the rest of the stuff that he did prior to that. If he is back to what Watson used to be, where does that rank him in the division, and where does that put him in the pecking order with the league?
Where he used to be, to me, was somewhere between the second and fourth best quarterback in the league. I thought he was really, really playing well before this unbelievable stint of being off. And frankly, I thought he was horrible last year. I don't know if you guys agree or not, but I thought he was.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's undeniable. I don't know how to comment on him. I'm not ignoring your guys' question at all, but I think he's the hardest player in the league right now to evaluate. I heard you guys kind of chatting right before I came on. I really like what the Browns have done to build around him. I adore Nick Chubb. I think he's the best back in the league. But it's going to be Deshaun's offense, not Chubb's. It's going to be more shotgun. I think Elijah Moore is a tremendous addition. I like Tillman a lot as well for the now and the long term. So I don't know. I do think there's a couple things, even at his best, that were problematic. Is he takes a lot of sacks. He holds the ball a long time. And I think his arm is good, not great, which worries me just for late weather, Cleveland, as we all know. Again, I spent a year there with the Browns. It's much different than Pittsburgh, by the lake there. So I think his arm is fine. It's just not tremendous. But where does that stack up against Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Herbert? All these guys in the AFC. Lawrence is coming on like gangbusters. To say he's going to be in that company, I think is possible, but probably far-fetched. Those guys are just so tremendous right now, particularly Mahomes, of course.
When you look at this AFC North, obviously the Browns finish in last place. You're in Pittsburgh. They've never finished under 500 with Mike Tomlin. Yeah. Where do you see the Browns fitting in? Baltimore, obviously, they've gotten better with adding wide receivers and changing offense coordinators. Where does the Browns stack up in this AFC North in your eyes?
I think it's the best division in football. I don't think there's a below average team in the group. I hate to throw this out there, but I just have to. I can't help myself. My apologies. But the last time the Browns in this division, finished ahead of the Steelers was 1989. So there's some history here that shows that the black and gold, who don't have the star power that Cleveland does, just has a better penchant for winning football games, and I trust their coach the most in the division, followed by Harbaugh. I'm really worried about this Joe Burrow injury, though. I mean, a plant leg calf, and this guy didn't have any training camp last year because of the appendectomy. He blew out his knee before that. Early in his career, he was just beat to death, but when they didn't have any offensive linemen. I think he's by far clearly the best quarterback in the division, and the Bengals are the team to beat. But I don't like how they're trending right now. I have some questions about the Ravens' defense, especially their defensive front. Now with their coordinator change a year ago, they don't rely on blitz for pressure. They need a front four to get there, and I don't think they have the pass rushers to do it. I'm really excited about the Ravens' offense overall and the changes that you referenced. But we don't know that's going to be a success. That's the biggest scheme change in the entire league. There absolutely could be growing pains. But frankly, I'd probably give the Bengals a 35% chance to win the division. The Browns and Steelers around 25-ish, something in that neighborhood. But all these teams are just going to beat the dirt out of each other 6 times a year. And I think Cincinnati's clearly the team to beat. But it's a really, really good division.
Matt, you mentioned Elijah Moore. There's a lot of hype for him. We're all optimistic about his potential, but there hasn't been much production the first 2 years. I know it was a Jets team with bad quarterback play, but he was unhappy there. He, was complaining about getting opportunities. What happened there, and what makes you think he'll be much better here?
Because I think he's a tremendous route runner. I think he's highly, highly competitive, and I think his style of game fits the league really well. He's a separator. He explodes out of his breaks. He's a technician. He's good on the outside. He's good on in the slot. I don't know what happened in New York, but in this instance, I tend to side with the player. And frankly, he had some of the worst quarterback play in the entire league for his career. I think it was one of the best moves of the offseason for the Browns to go get this guy.
Matt, another big guy that we went out and got two guys, Dalvin Tomlinson and Zadarius Smith. When you go back, and we had one of the beat reporters for the Vikings on, and he talked about how much they love Dalvin Tomlinson and what he was able to do for them in the middle. It gives you a little more pass rush than meets the eye. And then Zadarius Smith, the guy who they thought was playing at a defensive player of the year type caliber in the first half of the season. You mix that with Myles Garrett and Jim Schwartz with his emphasis on getting upfield with the quarterback or getting after the quarterback and penetrating. What type of defense can the Browns be up front if they're able to kind of put things together?
Light years better than last year. I'll be honest. I thought their defensive tackle room last year was one of the worst position groups in the entire league. And Tomlinson is a stabilizing professional player that gives you a little bit of pass rush, but is going to hold the point and let those smaller linebackers run and hit. I thought the Browns were very weak up the middle last year, starting with the front, and I don't think that'll be the case. I don't know what you'll get out of Ika in his first year, but I'm sure you'll get quality snaps on early downs. Tomlinson is a high-quality player. I wouldn't call him a star, but he's 1,000 times better than what they played with before. And the beauty of Zadarius Smith, too, is he's going to kick inside in passing situations and be a real force that way. You guys didn't even mention Isaiah McGuire. That was one of my favorite draft picks in the entire draft. And Okoronkwo, whose name I butcher all the time, but I think was a tremendous signing. So I think this defensive front, especially in Jim Schwartz's system, is going to be extremely good. And I'm strongly leaning to making my defensive player of the year pick being Myles Garrett.
Well, I'm glad you was bringing up defense because my next question is about the secondary, and particularly not the corners but the safety position. They bring in Juan Thornhill to be a true post safety, and I love that. But I do believe, and tell me if I'm overhyping this. I think that Grant Delpit is a huge piece that needs to be good on this defense because he has to be essentially the Malcolm Jenkins of this defense. And, Malcolm Jenkins was known for covering running backs, covering tight ends, covering slots. Do you see Delpit being that type of safety?
I think it's a really pivotal year in his career. I love him coming out of school. I think there's a ton of ability there. I think the system fits him well. I kind of feel like it's put up or shut up time for him, and I lean towards him doing well because I did really like him quite a bit coming out. I also want to mention Rodney McLeod. You guys probably know better than I do, but he's at least the reliable stabilizing force back there. I think he's a nice pickup too.
Matt, get back to the Steelers here for a second. Their offensive line's been an issue the last couple of years. I know it improved last year a little bit. How good is it? Is it still a problem? Like, they haven't run, the Steelers, we always think of running with the Steelers, but their running game hasn't been particularly great the last couple of years. So what do you make of their running game and their offensive line right now?
So if you go look at the numbers, any of the advanced stats in particular, EPA, things of that nature, this offense was dismal before their Week 9 bye, just horrible. And they played really good teams. After their bye, Pickett played 1,000 times better. The running game really came along. Now, it's not an explosive running game. I mean, they do not break long runs, but they were at the top of the league in running against 8-man boxes. They were at the top of the league in not having any negative runs. So they consistently churn out 5, 6, 3 yards. And that's very Najee Harris-like. So a couple notes about the offense overall. Last year, the Steelers' offense was by far the youngest in the league. And they also were by far the healthiest in the league. So that's going to work two ways. Chances are you're going to get more banged up. That's just bound to happen. And their offensive line, they started the same 5 guys from start to finish. That never, ever happens. But you also look at it and say, well, all these guys are a year older, too. If they were that young, now they've been in NFL stadiums and know how to win. You add Isaac Solomalu at left guard. That was their weakest spot last year. He's a really good player. And I don't think Broderick Jones will start from Week 1. I think he's going to be a bit of a project, but eventually he's going to be the starting left tackle. So I think the line's in a really good spot. Doesn't have a lot of star power and doesn't get the recognition, but it really came around as the season went on.
Matt, I'm looking at the totality of everything in the AFC, and I haven't seen it this stacked in a long time. I mean, you take a look at the Dolphins with the 2 receivers that they got. Shame Jalen Ramsey is out, but they were making moves. You take a look at the teams like the Jets who got Aaron Rodgers, brought in receivers. Sauce Gardner is a guy over there. Defense is really good with the Jets. Justin Herbert, is kind of put up. It seems like this is the Justin Herbert. Hey, are you in that mix or really not? Like, we really want to see what you're doing coming up to get where Allen and Burrow is. And then obviously you got teams like the Browns and the Jacksonville Jaguars, like who you said are coming on very strong. This might be the most competitive I've ever seen the league. And it's crazy, just for outside the box thinking, how is the NFL able to do this? How, like, every single year there's a competitive team, and it looks like it's stacked from 1 to 12.
Yeah, it's the AFC is brutal right now. Real quick though, your team and my team, the Browns and the Steelers, are really fortunate in terms of outside the division. They don't really play a lot of the big dogs in the conference, so the schedule's not so bad for both those teams compared to a lot of these teams that we're talking about. I mean, the Chiefs, the Bills, the Bengals, the Jaguars, they all play each other. I mean, that's going to be a brutal gauntlet, for all those teams, let alone the divisions they're in. But what's amazing to me is maybe 8 of the top 10 quarterbacks are all in the same conference, and most of them are extremely young. This isn't Brady and Ben and Peyton Manning at the end of their career. Like, the best is ahead for these guys. Maybe Pickett, maybe Watson, who knows? But I know the other guys are already great or, have very little questions about. So I say this all the time on Pittsburgh radio is like, I think the Steelers will be a better team than they were last year. They still might not make the playoffs. They still is going to be an uphill time to compete. And the same's true for the Browns, the Jaguars, the Chargers. they got this Mahomes guy who's Michael Jordan's in the conference too.
Yeah.
Matt, we got a guy, one of our producers back behind the curtain had this issue with Isaiah Thomas going down yesterday, and Alex Wright. Will you tell us what it is about McGuire that you like, and please ease his mind and tell him that things
They're panicking.
Yeah.
They're panicking, Matt. Tell them how crazy they are. Please.
I think he's a really good prospect. I think he's tough. He's physical. He holds the point well. I thought he'd be a day 2 pick. They got him in the 4th round. I think he's got size. He's got physicality. He plays hard. Bigger end that maybe he could kick inside, kind of like Smith, in time after he learns a little bit. He's got good length. I thought he was a much better prospect than where he went in the draft. It wouldn't have shocked me if he was a 2nd-round pick, but he is a rookie.
Mikey McNuggets, you have a question. Go ahead for Matt.
Yeah, Matt, how long have you been involved in scouting NFL draft prospects?
Wow. So to give you some idea, I turned 50 this year. I'm an old man. So my first paid job, I was at Pitt for 3 years doing recruiting. And that was Antonio Bryant's last year and both of Larry's years, to give you some idea. So I was there with all of Larry Fitzgerald's practices, helped recruit him, all those good things. Helped recruit Darrelle Revis to Pitt, who just went in the Hall of Fame. So I'm an old man. And then I went to Akron for just an 8-month stretch before we built this relationship with the Browns. And I scouted for the Browns for 1 year. So I got hired the day after they drafted Kellen Winslow Jr., and I got fired the day after we selected Braylon Edwards, as did everybody in the building, when Romeo took over. And then I was at ESPN for 10 years and I've been doing it that long. Since Larry Fitzgerald was 18 years old, I guess is the best way to put it.
All right, so the guy on our show, Tyvis Powell, who's asked a couple of questions, Tyvis, do you happen to remember your scouting report on Tyvis coming out of Ohio State in 2015?
I do not. I apologize.
Well, here, I'll fill it in for you.
You should have thought about Jim Thorpe. The guy should have won the Jim Thorpe Award, best DB you ever seen, greatest hips, recovery speed, everything. It was just a jack of all trades.
What about Johnny Football there, Matt?
I was not a fan, at all. I didn't think his game would translate well at all. I thought he was so reliant on Mike Evans, and I think I was right.
Who's the quarterback? You got to be honest here. We're taking you at your word. Who's the quarterback that you thought was going to be good, nobody else thought they were going to be good, and you were right about? And who's the quarterback you thought was going to be good, but he turned out not to be good?
Okay. So I'm on record, and few were at the time. I thought Pat Mahomes was the best quarterback in his draft class. Several went ahead of him, Watson, Trubisky.
Right.
And I was same with Lamar. I thought Lamar and Mahomes were the best quarterbacks in their respective classes. And I think I was right. Well, Josh Allen's in the mix.
Yeah. I
also found this kid named Joe Flacco at Audubon High School many, many moons ago that nobody would offer, and we beat Ohio University on him. So that's one of my feathers in my cap many, many moons ago.
Could have changed my whole
Man,
you could have changed our whole damn trajectory.
Joe Flacco.
Good gracious.
And who'd you get it wrong on? Man?
I was a big Wentz believer. I pretty much I think that ship has sailed. I'm still a Jameis Winston believer. Maybe I'm crazy, but I think he could be Geno Smith late in his career. But I thought he was going to be a star.
I did too.
Matt, I got to follow up on something you just said. You liked Lamar. You liked Mahomes. You didn't like Manziel. What was the difference when you looked at those guys and how kind of Lamar and Manziel, how Lamar played as the free-flowing scrambler, kind of make stuff up on the fly as opposed to Manziel that made you like Lamar and not Johnny Football?
I think those two that end up making it are way, way, way more gifted. I mean, I thought Manziel was a very overrated athlete. And frankly, this kind of is true for Baker Mayfield too. Like if you're a smaller quarterback, and Russell Wilson's dealing with this right now, if you're a shorter quarterback, it still matters. But you better be really fleet of foot and elusive in the pocket. And I thought Mayfield and Manziel didn't have that, nor did I think that they were close to the runners or creators. Certainly the runner that Lamar is. I mean, he's as good as you ever see. But I thought that Mahomes was a much better creator with the football, with more safety to his game without compromising aggression.
Matt, if every NFL team was redrafting. If you were redrafting the entire NFL right now, forget contracts, but factor in guys' age. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes would go first. Who would go second?
I think Josh Allen, quickly followed by Burrow.
Okay, and Jalen Hurts. Would any team take Jalen Hurts over Burrow?
I don't think so. He would be 6th or 7th on my list. I would still take Herbert over him. I would still take Lamar over him. Maybe Lawrence.
Okay.
Really quickly, Matt, who's the first, in that scenario, who's the first non-quarterback off the board?
Ooh.
Jay Jetta.
Justin Jefferson certainly comes to mind if you think about age.
Yeah.
I think there's 5 elite edge rushers. There's Myles Garrett, there's TJ Watt, there's Max Crosby, who I would put 5th. There's Nick Bosa and Micah Parsons.
Yeah.
So Parsons would probably be my first defensive pick.
If you had to bet on one of on these players getting in the Hall of Fame or not today, Myles Garrett, Joel Bitonio, Nick Chubb, yay or nay, Hall of Fame, if you had to bet today?
Yay, but not Bitonio. He's great. Yeah, I just don't think – I'm thinking of guards that went in recently. I wouldn't put him in the Hutchinson Faneca class. I'd put him behind a Zach Martin of this era. So I think he's a just missed Hall of Very Good. Mm-hmm. Running backs are a weird conversation, though, because none of these guys – like, look at Derrick Henry's career rushing yards. It's really low on the list, but you look at Henry and think, that guy's a Hall of Famer, right? Maybe 1 or 2 good years. And I think Chubb's in the same boat, but none of those guys are going to ever end up top 5 all-time rushing leaders. People just don't run the ball enough, and they don't play as long anymore. But if you compare Chubb to the players of his era, I think he's even better than Henry. And if he does it for 3 or 4 more years, I think he's going to have a really strong case.
I agree, and I think when it comes to not only running backs, but quarterbacks and wide receivers, we have to look at the numbers differently than we used to. For quarterbacks and receivers, there's got to be higher levels to reach, and because you're going to have quarterbacks that are good, that are putting up better numbers than current Hall of Famers, and vice versa with running backs. You got to look at the numbers a little differently. Matt, great stuff, man. We appreciate
you, man.
That was fun. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks.